Hi, my name is Carrie Glover, and I am happy to be here today with you to train you a little bit about how you can engage in advocacy at the state level and talking to your state legislators about issues that matter to you as someone who cares about access to healthcare, about the impact of our healthcare system on people who live with bleeding disorder, and just how you can make sure that patient voices are heard before the legislature. This is a really important piece of how bills become laws and how we influence legislation is making sure that real faces and real voices are put to the issues that come before the legislature. So much of this job and of the work that goes on in Olympia is legislators coming together and talking with lobbyists, and it's all like, here are some data, here are some statistics, and here is this report that talks about this system and how it impacts with this system. But what really is meaningful and what really comes together is when people come, and then this year virtually come, but people bring their story to the legislature and share it with their legislators and share it with those people who are making decisions about these important issues to put a face on the issue and how this impacts real people's lives. So with that, today I'm going to talk through a couple of different ways of how you can engage with the legislature, how you can put your story before the people who have been elected to represent you in Olympia, and how some of the tips and tricks of how you can put together your argument, how you can frame that, and some of the do's and don'ts of what you can do today. Also, I'll help you walk through the process of how you figure out who your legislator is. So just a couple of things that'll help you and how you can engage in the advocacy world of Olympia. So I will start with how we prepare for meetings. And so that's always one of the most overwhelming things. It's like, okay, so you'll go through some of the steps, you'll find your legislator, and you're going to go and talk to your legislator about a meeting. Some of the most important stuff is making sure that you understand who your legislator is and what's important to them. With that, I'll start with the first step, which is figuring out how to find who your legislator is. So I'm going to attempt to share my screen here and open up the state legislative website. So this webpage is kind of our bread and butter, especially during the legislative session. This is where you can see what the legislature is doing today. So you can see here that they are both on the floor today, both the House and the Senate. But you can also look for bill information. You can see what the different committees of the legislature are. You know, there's people who talk about children, youth, and families, housing, and of course, healthcare. And you can just dig through. There's a ton of information on this website. The first piece we're going to start with is figuring out how you find who your legislator is. And we're going to do that through the left-hand side here, which is the Find Your District button. You go to this and it opens up a nice little handy dandy map that is a district finder. In here, you'll put in your address, and you have to put in both your street, your city, and your zip code, and that'll give you, that's how you have to be that specific in order to find your legislative district. Make sure you're putting in your home if you're trying to meet with your legislator versus like an office address, because you want to make sure you're finding the person who has been elected to represent you instead of where you work. And so make sure you put in your home address here. So then you just click Find Your District. It's really that simple. Down here, you'll see actually there's two different buttons here. I'm talking mostly today about state legislative policy and advocacy, and so that is legislative. You could also figure out here who your congressional members are. So those who represent you in Washington, D.C. with the U.S. Congress. Click that tab and it'll tell you who your federal legislators are. But again, I'm going to stick to the state stuff, so stay on that legislative tab. For the address that I put in, it pulls up each legislative district in Washington has one senator and two representatives. So for this address, these are the legislators who represent this person in Olympia: Senator Reuven Carlisle, Representative Noel Frame, and Representative Liz Berry. From this page, now you know who they are, but to get to their information, you can click on their name. So I'm going to click on Senator Carlisle, and this pulls up some more information about Senator Carlisle. So you can see again here, this person was in the 36th legislative district. You can see where their Olympia address is in normal times when we're there in person, but then he also does have a district office. You can see the different committees that he sits on. So Senator Carlisle sits on Environment, Energy, and Technology, the Rules Committee, and the Ways and Means Committee. So the people who make decisions about money. On this page, you can also pull up their homepage, which will give you even more background information on them. And this, when we talk about how to prepare for a meeting, this is one of the most important things that I think a lot of people skip, but it's really important to do. Go into their biography, learn a little bit about them. Sometimes in here, you'll learn that somebody was a cancer survivor. You'll learn that they're a mom, that they're a dad, that they have a dog, some of the things that are important to them personally, which might help you make a connection by the time you go in and have a meeting with them. So go through to your 3 different legislators, your senator and your 2 representatives, and read through their biographies on that homepage. So again, I'll walk through again how you get to this point is from this page, when you've clicked on their name. Here, we'll deal with Representative Frame as another example. We'll click on Representative Frame's name here. Pulls up here all of her information of the different committees she's on. But I'm going to click on Homepage. And same thing, all of these web pages for legislators are formatted in similar ways, so all of them will have a biography. You can click on here and see what is the top priorities for Representative Frame. So again, just really good to ground yourselves in who your legislators are and what rises as like top priorities for them, what's their background, what really is going to resonate with them. And whether it's on the issue you're talking about or not, it just helps you understand their priorities, but also understand and ground yourself in that they're a normal person. I think there's so much stuff that gets wrapped up in movies and in drama and all this stuff that happens in the papers about legislators. And the reality is that these are people who really care and want to make a difference in their community. There's somebody who there was a pothole in their street and they got really frustrated because this pothole would not get fixed. And so they tried to make a difference. They tried to get it fixed with the Department of Transportation and it didn't get fixed. So they decided they were going to run for city council, and so that they were going to fix that pothole from the inside. And then they decided, wow, I can really make a difference. And so then they run for the state legislature. And so like, this is the story again and again. We have legislators who are veterinarians, who work at Microsoft, who work as teachers, as nurses. Like there's a whole gamut of people who represent in Olympia. And it's just really important to understand that they're normal people who are doing this job to try and make a difference. So that is one of the biggest things you can do to prepare for a meeting, is get to know who your legislators are a little bit ahead of time. When you do get a meeting with a legislator, your meeting is probably going to be about 15 minutes if it's during the legislative session. That is not a lot of time, especially in virtual world, because you have to first navigate all of the technical glitches that will inevitably happen. And then when you start looking at 15 minutes, you have 2 minutes, 3 minutes of technical glitches, and then you're down to 12 minutes, and then somebody's on mute and things start to shrink. So you want to make sure you understand a little bit about them going into it so that you can really be focused and know how to have an impact with that individual. The other thing you can really do before you head into your meeting with a legislator is be prepared on your issue. So that, again, going back to the homepage for the legislature, which I don't think I gave the web address before, but that is www.leg.wa.gov. That's leg.wa.gov is the legislative homepage. And so on this page, you can also click on bill information. And this is where you can search for the issues that are before the legislature this year. So for example, we'll pull up House Bill 1196. And this bill is something that's really important to people with bleeding disorder, people who care about access to healthcare, and this legislation is around audio-only telemedicine. So obviously in COVID times, we've had to get really creative with how people can access their doctors and minimize risk. And some of that has been through telemedicine. And this bill works to address a hole that is with audio-only telemedicine. So people being able to access if you don't have a smartphone or a computer. So we are going to go into the details of this, but as an example, this is where how you can find that legislation if you know the bill number, and then you can go down here and you can read up a little bit on whatever issue you're looking on. So these bill reports are really helpful, provides a summary of the legislation and some background on it. And so these are really important tools that help you brush up on the issue so that you're informed and know what you're speaking about as you head into a meeting with a legislator. So with that, I'm going to share a different screen that talks about, we'll transition at this point from how to find who your legislator is and how to prepare for a meeting to how you have an effective meeting. And we provide, I do this. I apologize for the technical difficulties. It's not sharing. I'm going to try this again. All right, there we go. My screen is sharing. So, oh, and I shared the wrong one. Give me one more second. Oh, it's because it's named the wrong file. I'm going to take 3 here. All right, well, I'm not able to share that document apparently. Let me try opening up one more thing. So I'll start talking about it though as I'm opening up this file. Like I said, when you have a meeting with a legislator, especially during the legislative session, these are 15-minute meetings and they go by so fast. By the time you do introductions, like I said, technical glitches, and then you go through the introductions, you really then only have a couple of minutes and you want to talk about your issue and what's important to you. So you want to go in with some structure because you'll want to be able to do your introductions. You want to make sure you talk about who you are, why you care, the issue you're talking about. You want to be able to ask them to support your issue, and you want to be able to hear what they have to say. All of that in 15 minutes, and it goes by really, really fast. So one of the things that I talk to people about is going in with a plan, with this structure, and we call that structure hook, line, and sinker. And so I would say, first of all, before we get into the hook, line, and sinker, is the first thing is, we already talked about it, prepare and have a plan B. So prepare. We talked about how to understand background on your legislators. We talked about having learning about the issue you're talking about and making sure you're up to speed. But you also want to prepare with your technology in virtual land. You don't want to show up and not have downloaded the Zoom app, or you want to make sure that your phone, if you're on your computer, that your phone is on mute so that you're not getting a phone call in the middle of a meeting. You want to make sure that you have a call-in option in case video doesn't work or your internet becomes unstable. So it's all of these things. So first and foremost, as you head into a meeting, make sure you are prepared. Then when you start this meeting, hook, line, and sinker. So the first thing is the hook. Make them care about you. And the biggest reason why they care about you, you've found who your legislators are. And the reason why they care about you is because they are your elected official. And you might not have voted for them, but no matter what, whether you voted for them or not, they are elected to represent you in Olympia. So this is who I am. This is why you care about me. Hi, my name is Carrie Glover. I live in the 36th legislative district. I'm one of your constituents. That is one of the biggest hooks because you are their boss. The other thing is, like, make it personal. So not just that I live in the district, but I live just around the corner from the barking dog, kind of on the backside of Finney Ridge in the Ballard area, so that kind of gives a little bit more connections so that they understand who you are and where you are in the district. And some of these things, they'll be like, oh my God, I love the barking dog. That's one of my favorite restaurants. And it makes that personal connection with who you are, where you are in the district, and why they should care about you. So that's your hook. Sometimes you're in a meeting with multiple people, and especially in Zoom land, it's really amazing how many people can access the legislature. People can do it from far corners of the state and be able to dial in and have a meeting with their legislator in the way that they haven't before, because we typically had to go to Olympia to do those meetings. But this year, with having so many meetings with legislators on Zooms and Microsoft Teams and all this stuff, people can access from anywhere. But when you get a big group, think again about those 15 minutes. If you have 10 people in a meeting and everybody goes through and does their introduction, that might suck a lot of time out of your meeting and not leave enough time to talk about what you're really there for, which is to ask them to support an issue that's important to you. So if you have a big group of people, think about how you can be more efficient, how you can tailor the meeting a little bit. Give a list ahead of time to the legislative staff, email in a list of here's all the people who are going to be in the meeting. Here's, a little blip about them, so that then you're not burning all of your meeting on introductions. If it's just you, take the couple of minutes. If it's two of you, take a couple of minutes. But if it's much bigger than that, maybe send in a list ahead of time to be able to get those introductions done and say, here's all the people who are on the call, but I'm going to dive right into the issue. So you want that connection, but at the same time, you don't want to burn your entire meeting on going through a round robin and, next person, next box, because that can really suck up all the time from your meeting. But the introductions, basic, this is your hook. The next part is your line, how you're going to reel someone in. And that is really the key of why you are doing this. And the line is your story, is drawing them in on an issue, putting a face to the issue that we're talking about today. And you all have stories. You all have been impacted by the healthcare system. And so you want to make sure and share that, and don't spend too much time going and looking for statistics and stuff. That's not the piece of what you can say that is going to make the biggest impact. The biggest impact is, I'm talking about access to healthcare and how much these out-of-pocket costs are impacting my life. Let me tell you about my medical bills and how I burn through my family's deductible, how I have to meet that in the first quarter every year. Let me tell you about what it was like to live in a rural part of state where I don't have consistent Wi-Fi and I can't access telemedicine because I don't have audio only. I don't have a computer. I don't have stable internet. I can't do that. Like, these are the stories that they'll be like, this is an important issue that is impacting people in my district. So really this is the meat. This is where you want to spend most of your time, that precious time with those members. And even then, within a 15-minute meeting, we're talking about 3 to 5 minutes that you're talking about your story. So this time goes by quickly. Going back to the prep work, make sure you prep talking through your story ahead of time, so that you're prepared on how you're going to talk about it, what the flow is, to make sure that you're the most efficient with your time. The last piece is sinker. This is where you've hooked them, you're reeling them in, and this is where you're going to bring them in the boat. You want to make sure you have that ask. I want you to vote in support of House Bill 1196, which would allow for audio-only telemedicine and parity coverage. So you're talking about the issue, you're putting your face, your story with that issue, and then you're saying, can I count on your support? Is really important to actually ask them. Can I count on your support? Will you support this issue? You want to make sure to ask them that question. The answer might be yes, which is wonderful. The answer might be, I got to think on a little bit more. I got to dig in a little bit. They might ask you some questions. The answer might be, no, I just don't, this isn't the right issue for me. I have some concerns with it. Listen to what they say if they have concerns. If you're working, with an organization like Bleeding Disorder Foundation, you can relay that information back to staff so that then we're aware if there's we can hear that as the lobbying team, and we can get that information. We can know how to follow up with those offices. But sometimes the answer is no. Regardless of what the answer is, you always say thank you. Thank you for your time. Thank you for hearing me talk about this issue. And we just like to show respect for our elected officials, and just always say thank you for that time and space that they give us. The last thing that I'll talk about in regards to the meetings is kind of getting into some of the tips and tricks. So this is how we provided this hook, line, and sinker framework of how to have an effective meeting with your legislators. I'm going to pull up this document that kept opening up the wrong one, but now it's the right one. So here are some tips and tricks of when you're having a meeting with a legislator. This version has been updated to incorporate some of the virtual session tips, which we talked about some of these, having a plan B, testing your technology in advance. If you have a group, have a point person and think through, if your group is really big, how to communicate ahead of time so you don't run through all of those, don't burn through all of your time. You also, one of the biggest things I always tell people, and this kind of gets to the last point I said about always saying thank you, is that remember that there is a spectrum of support. in legislators. While it does ultimately come down to yes or no, I'm going to vote yes on a bill, I'm going to vote no on a bill, is behind the scenes, it's more of a spectrum. Someone might ultimately end up a no vote, but if they might be able to help, be part of the conversation, help bring awareness to a weakness in a bill that we could make it stronger, if they might be able to convince some of their other legislators to be a little bit softer on it and not be quite such a hard no and advocate so hard against it that like maybe they're no, but they can help walk people back a little bit. So just remember that things are not always so cut and dry as yes and no as a vote ultimately comes down to, but there's a lot more that happens behind the scenes, and there's a lot more that is down a path in the future. They might be a no today, but maybe they were all on the fence a little bit, and as you met with them, you heard a little bit of that opening of a door, and you can continue to talk to them and work with them towards the next issue. So remember that this is just a process, and that this is why we're always respectful. This is why we always say thank you, is because it is a spectrum of support, and you never know where opportunities lie, even when it ultimately comes down to a yes or a no vote. Another thing to remember is that advocacy is a marathon, not a sprint. These things don't happen quickly. They take years and years often to pass legislation. One of the early bills that I worked on took 6 legislative sessions to pass, and it was on a really simple concept, but it took a very long time to educate the legislature and bring them on enough and garner that bipartisan support. But it did ultimately pass with really strong bipartisan support. So it's a level of patience and advocacy and understanding that we're in this for the long haul and that we can get this done. So you have to be committed, you have to be in it, don't give up, there might be days where it's frustrating, but you keep on going and you keep talking to your legislators and keep telling them why these issues are important to you as a constituent in their district. Another thing that I always like to reiterate with people, especially those who are part of organizations, who are wonderful entities, but like don't waste an ask. So this is something that happens a lot when people are like, oh, meeting with my legislator, I'm going to totally invite them to my bleeding disorder walk or whatever. Like that is a really perfect follow-up ask. When you're in that meeting, you want to make sure that you are focused on asking them to support that issue. If you ask them to come to a walk, they get to say yes to that, and they don't have to say yes to what you're asking about the legislation. Give them an out when you ask them to something else. So don't waste an ask. Ask them to support your issue, thank them for that meeting, and then follow up with them and continue to build that relationship and follow up and ask to them to your event. Don't use that meeting. Don't waste an ask in that meeting by asking them to come to an event, because that's super easy to say, oh yeah, sure, I'll come to that. And then they're like, well, I'll think about the bill. Don't let them off the hook that easily. Ask them, keep it focused on the ask, keep it focused on the issue you're talking about that day, and then continue to build that relationship and ask them to your walk, because that is really cool when they come, and it's really great for them to come be supportive of that. But do that as a follow-up ask, not your core ask in a meeting. This document is available also. You can always reach out to Stephanie with the bleeding disorder, and she has these documents available that she can get back out to you. But there are lots of other tips and tricks in here that just kind of help you think through and prepare as you go into a meeting with a legislator. With that, at this point in the presentation, I think that's really kind of wraps up the key steps of how to have a meeting with an elected official. Preparing ahead of time, making sure you understand who your legislators are, first finding who they are, and then understanding their background and understanding the background on your issue. Then when you get into a meeting, you go through that process, that hook, line, and sinker. Who you are, why they should care about you, putting your face to an issue, why this issue matters to you, and what this impact of this issue is on your life as a real person. And then your sinker, asking them to support the issue or oppose the issue if it's something you don't like. having that nice structure and keeping in mind all those tips and tricks of how to be most effective. What are the do's and don'ts? How do you make sure you stay on messaging? How do you make sure you have the most effective meeting that you possibly can? This year is really unique. This year really is strange, and there's a lot of opportunities and there's a lot of stuff that is hard. But really, at its core, the most exciting thing this year is the opening of access of people across the state. People can access the legislature from anywhere in the state in your living room. You can be in your Uggs and throw on a blouse up top, but you're still able to have that connection with your legislators. And it means that our legislators are hearing from real people more than ever. So this is a great opportunity to take advantage of that and reach out to your elected officials and have those conversations. Thank you so much for spending time with me today. And I hope you have fun getting out there and reaching out and making a difference in this little corner of our world. Thanks.